2. Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We are doing a lot of radio this week, feeding our partner on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation, Brian Billick, going into the Ring of Honor this week. It is no longer a homecoming game to play the Cleveland Browns, although Brian Billick had his fun at the expense of the Browns fans. I have known this guy since the old Cleveland Browns are around, now the new Cleveland Browns, and sort of look like the old new Cleveland Browns at 1-2 coming in this week after a hard-fought loss on Sunday Night Football. Kenny Roda is at the Kenny Roda, and you can find him out in Canton, Ohio at 1480 WHBC. I have known him from the days back in the land of Cleve and pictures of the old Jacobs Field, and you've got a baseball team and we don't, Roda, but man, I had 6 months of fun poking at the Browns bear of, they're going to Miami, they're going to the Super Bowl and all that stuff. And then the season started 3 weeks ago, and certainly I know you had to temper some enthusiasm out there in the northern Ohio region, but this isn't good if you're a Browns fan. It doesn't look good right now, does it?
No, they're struggling offensively, Nestor. Always great to be with you, by the way, and it seems like we're always talking about the Ravens are good and the Browns stink. Well, so far, that's the case again here this year with high expectations coming in with a new head coach, Baker Mayfield returning, OBJ added to the offense. On paper, it looks like the best offense in the AFC North and right up there in the entire AFC. But to this point, the offense has struggled mightily. Baker Mayfield has struggled. Last year, he burst onto the scene as a rookie, number 1 overall pick, and helps the Browns win their first ever game in about 2 years. And then all of a sudden you've got teams able to study him, look at what his strengths are, look at what his weaknesses are. And I think we're seeing some of that in the first 3 games with the Browns, but also his head coach, who, by the way, is a first-time ever head coach and a first-time ever offensive coordinator for a full season, Freddie Kitchens. He's struggled more, though, than Baker Mayfield has. I think some of Baker's problems are because of Freddie Kitchens, who through the first 3 games has been out-coached in at least 2 of the first 3 games. And the Jets game, they stink, and the Browns struggled to win that one. So right now, this is a struggle offensively from the quarterback, from the offensive coordinator to the head coach, who happens to be the same guy.
Kenny, you've had a lot of experience out there in Cleveland with quarterbacks and saying, this guy's going to be the savior, this guy's, going to be the next quarterback, and whether it's Tim Couch and all the way through, not just your organization, but any organization that struggled. We had Kyle Bowler here, right? Chris Redman. We had guys that weren't the answer. We drafted Lamar Jackson. Everyone's skeptical. Who knows? Baker Mayfield's the latest in a long line. But, man, we don't talk about coaches much where we look at a quarterback and we say, yeah, he's a top 5 pick. He's Joey Harrington. He's, I don't know. Just name any of the 100 quarterbacks that were first-round quarterbacks that didn't make it, right? But with head coaches, we never look at those guys and say, that guy's a can't miss. They're always sort of a project, whether it was when Brian Billick was fired here and they brought in a special teams coach named John Harbaugh, right? The less famous of the Harbaugh brothers. And here he is 13 years later chugging along, maybe going to the Hall of Fame if he can win another Super Bowl or 2, right? Like he's hanging around that long, doing things differently. And yet the Browns go with Freddie Kitchens instead of like going with the veteran guy. And the Raiders go get John Gruden, who maybe 10 years too far gone and 10 million too deep, right? Like you never know what's going to work and who's going to be Sean McVay, right? Or John Harbaugh or Andy Reid, and who's going to be, I don't know, name any of the last 5 Browns coaches, right? Mike Pettin, who may never get another job, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I liked the hire of Freddie with the people that they talked to because of his ability, it looked like at least, his ability to bring the best out of Baker Mayfield last year, and Baker was comfortable with him. And the fact that we thought anyways that for the second straight year you'd have the same offensive coordinator, calling the plays and everything. But right now, it looks like this is too much for Freddie, even though today during his press conference, he said, no, I'm not giving up my play calling duties. This isn't too much for me. I'm going to be fine. I'm learning from my mistakes. And he made plenty of mistakes in the Sunday night game, not challenging the potential pass interference call, which, it would have been offsetting penalties, but it would have given them an extra down to get 9 yards. So instead of 2nd and 9, it was 3rd and 9, which led to his horrible a 4th and 9 call running a draw play, which was miserable. And then 1st and goal from the 4, he throws it 4 times down there, and they don't gain a single yard, and they lose. So he's looked overwhelmed. But the one thing I will say is we always play the schedule game, Nestor, before the season starts. Win, loss, win, loss. Okay, what do they end up? 10-6. I had the Browns going 10-6, and I had them starting 2-4, but winning 8 of their last, 10 games to get to that 10-6 mark. So I'm not ready to push the panic button, but I am concerned about an offensive line that has played horrible to this point, and I don't know how that offensive line gets better. I don't know if they can, play with 2 tight ends, if they go out and get a fullback to help pick up some of the blitzes, if the play calling can help hide the offensive line. I'm not sure how this offensive line gets better at this point, and that in turn is leading to some of the bad throws, more interceptions than touchdowns to this point with Baker Mayfield. So Freddie Kitchens has his work cut out for him as the head coach and as the offensive coordinator for a team that starts 1-2.
Kenny, how many years you been doing it out there in Northern Ohio? 25, 30? Where are you, buddy?
Let's see, 92 was my first year, so we're looking at right around 30 years.
Yeah, you and I are absolute contemporaries. My first broadcast was in December of 91. So, yeah, man, right when Camden Yards came about and, the Browns and the Indians and Jacobs Field and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you and I have been through all of that. The Browns have never really been any good, right? And there's been money spent and free agency spent and whatnot. I look at this and say, you can bring in Jarvis Landry. You can bring in Odell Beckham. You can get them at discounts. You can draft a number 1 quarterback who's actually good. Then to get them the ball, someone has to play the offensive line, right? And this is where, your best offensive lineman is still Joe Thomas, and I saw him in the box the other night calling games, right? So you only get so much money, you only get so many players, and you only get so many elite players. And this is where the balance of all of it comes in, that 1 week part of this, for the Ravens right now, they're trying to figure out stopping the run. They're trying to figure out the pass rush, and they allotted all these resources to the secondary, and their secondary is completely banged up right now. So, even the places you think are a strength can become a weakness instantaneously in this league.
Without question. And you're right, the offensive line, Joe Thomas, how ironic. They sucked when he was there. Now that he retires, they've got some weapons that he would be great protecting the blind side of the quarterback, and he's retired.
Hey, if Witten can come back, right? I mean, we can ask questions, right?
That's true, but he's dropped so much weight. He looks like he was a wide receiver and not an offensive lineman, but, from back in the day. So offensive line-wise, they're struggling. Defensive line-wise, they're a very good defensive line, and to play Sunday night's game against the second-best team in the NFL last year with 4 different starting secondary players, because the starting 2 corners and the starting 2 safeties were out with injury, to hold Sean McVay and company to just 20 points on Sunday night was pretty impressive. So defensively, the Browns have played well in all 3 games, even though that first game against the Titans looks like a blowout. The defense played pretty well in that game. So defensively, they're okay. Offensively, they're struggling mightily. Special teams-wise, they're about average with 2 rookie kickers, a rookie kicker and a rookie punter. So the key to this team is if the defense can continue to play at this level, you'll hope at some point the offense will catch up to them and get this team back on track. Scoring points. They've scored 13 points in 2 out of the first 3 games. That's not going to win football games in the NFL. So defensively, they're fine. Offensively, Freddie and Baker and those guys need to figure it out and see if they can get rolling. And I don't know, you mentioned how dinged up maybe the secondary is there for Baltimore. I'm just starting to study my time, with the Ravens to figure out what's the prediction going to be for Sunday. But maybe a banged-up secondary will help the offense get on track for the Cleveland Browns. But on the flip side of that, with Lamar Jackson in that running game, one of the things that has been an Achilles heel for the Browns over the last 2, 3, 4, 5, 30 years, whatever it's been, 20 years since they've come back, has been the inability to stop the run on defense, even though the defense is playing well. So it'll be interesting to see how these things manifest and play out come Sunday in Baltimore.
Kenny Roda joining us here from Canton, Ohio, where he's been doing it a long time. He's on in the afternoons there. You can find him at the Kenny Roda. That's RODA, as well as at WHBC 1480 out in Canton, Ohio, doing all things Northern Ohio. And, I know you guys got Ohio State to sort of fall back on from time to time, and the Indians are involved in all of this, but all of this hype on the Browns and where they are right now and coming in here an underdog this week, I would say demoralizing would be the beginning of all of this, and not just for Freddie Kitchens and for the organization, but for a really lubed-up fan base. That's all worked up about me coming out there at Christmas time and playing a game that matters.
Well, think about it. You had a Sunday night game, right? National TV, first time in 11 years. The fans are going absolutely crazy, and you lose that game. The opener, which, as you know, the only time the Browns have won an opener since they've been back in 1995 was when Jeff Garcia beat the Ravens in 2004, 20-3. That's the only time they've won an opener. They lost that again this year after all the hype. So they're 0-2 to start the season at home, and with a loss on national TV at home as well. So, yeah, the fan base obviously a little down right now after the first 3 weeks. But having said all of that, Nestor, and I watched the Chiefs-Ravens game, and I have my doubts about Lamar Jackson like many people do. I was impressed, even in defeat, with the effort that they put forth in coming back against the Kansas City Chiefs. But should the Browns somehow find a way to win this game, that 1-2 start, all the negative talk ends up being a 2-2 record and tied for first place. So this is a huge game for the Browns to see if they can get their season back on track and calm everybody down and stop pushing the panic button and getting away from that I-480 bridge thinking to jump off.
Kenny, I know you have some roots on the other side of this tree over near Pittsburgh, and certainly that looks like a complete mess. And down in Cincinnati, it looks like it's a mess. I mean, they all want to get rid of Marvin Lewis. Well, you get rid of Marvin Lewis. That's what you get now. So, but in the case of the Steelers, they're not there and they're not coming, right? And for everyone, for the whole league, for Tom Brady, for anybody that watches football, this is going to be a strange thing to watch wherever the deep depths of Mason Rudolph is for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers.
Well, I've never been a Tomlin guy, and I grew up there and still am a Steelers fan, even though I've worked in Cleveland now 30 years. And I look at that team right now, they're in complete rebuild mode. And I know Minkah Fitzpatrick's a pretty good player, but to give up your first-round pick next year in the draft for Minkah Fitzpatrick when that first-round pick could be top 10, dare I say top 5, and you're looking for a replacement for Ben Roethlisberger, they think it's Mason Rudolph. I don't think it is. But I think why they rolled the dice on this with Kevin Colbert, the GM, and Mike Tomlin, the coach, those two guys know they're on the hot seat. And so they're not worried about beyond this year. They're trying to win to save their jobs this year, so they go out and get Minkah Fitzpatrick. And I think it's going to come back and bite them in the ass in the long run, because I think this is a 5-win football team this year with no killer bees left at all, no true offensive weapons outside of Juju Smith-Schuster, and a defensive secondary that got a little bit better with Minkah Fitzpatrick, but is still a question mark. So I look at this as a 2-team race in the AFC North between, the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens.
It really is kind of incredible how bad the Bengals, the Steelers, certainly the Jets and the Dolphins are, right? Like, you said a 5-win team. As I look up and see all these 0-3s, I'm wondering how these teams are going to count to 5, honestly.
I don't, I can't argue with you there. I'm just, they play the Bengals twice, so I think the Steelers are better than the Bengals. That's 2 wins. So they got to find 3 more wins somewhere along the way. And the Browns, for whatever reason, I know Ben isn't playing because he owns the Browns, but the Steelers find a way to beat the Browns even when the Steelers played their backups. That's one thing Mason Rudolph can say is, hey, I've started against the Browns and beaten them, I believe. It was either last year or the year before. So I think the Steelers will get the 5, but I don't see more than that. And the Bengals, well, they're just the Bengals. I mean, that's just a putrid organization. They remind me of the L.A. Clippers back in the day, which was considered basketball Siberia, NBA Siberia. You go to, the L.A. Clippers in the NBA and the Cincinnati Bengals in the NFL. So it's a Browns-Ravens division to win or lose. And this one on Sunday, very important. If the Browns fall to 1-3 and more doubt creeps in, that's a huge, huge benefit to the Baltimore Ravens up 2 games and having that psychological edge. If the Browns could steal that game on the road, get back to even, and feel good about themselves, then we'll have a tight race the rest of the season.
Boy, I didn't look at the Browns' schedule when I was putting them in the Super Bowl, but the back half is soft. I mean, really soft, as you pointed out.
Exactly.
But, boy, the front end is, they got to come here this week. They got to go to San Francisco. It looks pretty good next week to play another Monday night bright light game. And then they come back, play Seattle at home, at New England, at Denver. Buffalo doesn't look to be an easy game, but the backside of the schedule is Miami, Arizona, teams we've played already, Cincinnati a couple times. So it feels like there's some wins on the back end of the schedule, but holding ground right now, this is a brutal stretch for them the next month.
3-3 would be huge if they could end up 3-3, the Browns, through the first 6 with that schedule. And think about this too, Nestor, talking about Freddie Kitchens earlier here today. Look at the coaching matchups through those first 6 games, right? Freddie, you know how we have spreads, and it was like the Browns were the underdog in all 16 games a couple of years ago. Well, throughout the first 6 games, Freddie was the underdog as far as the coaching matchups. Think about it. You had Freddie going up against Mike Vrabel, who isn't considered a great coach, but I would have given the edge to Mike Vrabel there. Now, in week number 2, okay, over Adam Gase, I took Freddie in that one. Adam Gase is a joke.
Well, there you go. Adam Gase was going to be the next great coach. He's now in his second organization, and he's, I don't know, name a quarterback. He's Josh Rosen. I mean, literally, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely. And then you look at this game here. McVay was in the Super Bowl, coaching edge to the Rams. Harbaugh's won a Super Bowl, coaching edge to the Ravens. Shanahan has more experience, so a slight coaching edge there, to the 49ers. Bill Belichick with the Patriots. I mean, so these coaching matchups have not worked in the Browns' favor early on, and Freddie's going to be an underdog for most of the season, if not in all the games, most of the games. So they've got a lot to overcome with new players trying to learn an offense which didn't play together in the preseason because they didn't want them to get hurt, and we're seeing that now with a head coach who's realizing there's a hell of a lot more to do than he thought there was, being the head coach and the offensive coordinator. So all of this right now has this team in flux, and we're going to see if they have found any answers come Sunday at 1 o'clock at Baltimore.
Kenny Rhoda is doing it out in the Cleveland, Canton, Akron area, out there in the Hall of Fame city, where we send people out there every year to go to the Hall of Fame. We're going to send Ozzy back out there and get him in as an executive this time around. You can find Kenny Rhoda at The Kenny Rhoda Show at 1480 WHBC in Canton, Ohio. And, hey, you always got Ohio State and, get the Tribe next month, right? So you at least got that going for you.
Yeah, the Buckeyes, I think, have a shot at getting to the playoffs this year, and we know this. They'll beat Michigan, so that'll be, 8 in a row over the Wolverines and Mr. Harbaugh's brother, who's an absolute joke there. But I hope he stays for 10 more years up there in Michigan to allow Ryan Day to build up his resume.
By the way, it is really, really cool to pile on Jim Harbaugh right now, isn't it? I mean, everybody's piling on Jimmy Harbaugh. Captain Comeback, right?
How can you not? I mean, he's an arrogant, and he played at Michigan. He's coaching at Michigan. I had a son who went to Ohio State. I paid plenty of money, to the Buckeyes to get my son through college. So I'm going to pile on anybody that's at Michigan, especially if it's Harbaugh. So, and the Indians, will see if they can make the postseason as Terry Francona continues to do an unbelievable job as the head man for the Indians. 6 games left. They got a shot. So hopefully by then we'll get this thing turned around with the Browns, and they can battle the Ravens for the AFC North this year.
All this tanking, you can win 95, 96, 97 games, still not make the playoffs. It's crazy, right?
It's insane. It really is. And, Terry, when they brought him on board, that's when the Indians organization turned around, 6, 7 years ago, whenever that was. So if they're going to, lose 90 or win 95 games and lose out on the playoffs, you can't blame it on Terry Francona with all the injuries they've had this year. So it's been a good season, and hopefully in these next 6 games, they'll win one more than Tampa Bay and get into the playoffs.
We're just trying to figure out if we're going to lose 109 or 110 or 111. You know what I mean? That's where we are at this point.
Yeah, hey, the way you talk and feel for the Browns, I feel for the Orioles that way with you guys. I understand the pain. Been there before.
Brother, we will see you on the other side. Look forward to visiting with you later on in the week. We'll get ready for the Cleveland Browns visiting Baltimore. We're getting you ready for head coach Brian Billick, our partner on behalf of Living Classrooms Foundation, going into the Ring of Honor. You can find Kenny Roda at the Kenny Roda Show out in Canton, Ohio. You can find me out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And giving some love to our pal Lee Tessier and the Lee Tessier Team Hotline. We welcome all of our guests in. Lee can get your condo, your home sold. You're in the market to buy as well, looking out for you and being a real advocate for you. It's what they do. Lee Tessier and Lee Tessier Team. Learn more at leetessier.com. You can find me 24 hours a day in the buyatoyota.com audio vault, 24 hours a day, anywhere in the world. Download, listen to what you want, when you want, where you want. It is the buyatoyota.com audio vault. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.